Over the last 20 years, the Crash Bandicoot universe has spawned a number of different characters. There have been both the recurrent figures, on which the plot so heavily relies, as well as those that have served merely as a temporary supplement, only to be left out for the remainder of the timeline. One of such characters is Rilla Roo, a bizarre hybrid that was abandoned by the franchise masterminds shortly after his first and only video game stint. In today's video, we're going to look into his brief appearance and try to contemplate on the origins of his very vague existence. Crash Bash, which was released in the year 2000, is by far the only home console party video game to be developed and released within the Crash series. After the original creators and developers Naughty Dog culminated their era of Bandicoot with the heavily praised Mario Kart clone entitled Crash Team Racing, the team moved on to making the no less famous Jak and Daxter series. Eurocom Entertainment Software, a British company known primarily for ports and arcade conversions, was presented with the difficult task of creating a successful follow-up to the already successful Crash Bandicoot anthology. While Crash Bash sold well and was re-released in 2001 as part of Sony's greatest hits lineup, the company was not selected to develop another Crash title for the next generation of consoles. Eurocom, just like Rilla Roo, came and went pretty unnoticed. So, who is Rilla Roo? I attempted to contact former Eurocom artists and even Mark Cerny himself to try to get an answer, but unfortunately got none. With very limited information at hand, I developed a few personal theories. When the credits for CTR rolled, we were presented with a conclusion to everyone's short-lived racing career. With the prize money earned, Tiny established a chain of fitness clubs, Coco founded an online dating website, Engine opened an auto repair shop, and Dingodile went into animal breeding? Now folks, that is already weird in itself and is worth a thoughtful pause, but we must pay attention to the next slide. Kangarooster and Dingo-Rilla? An internet user by the name of Hack once pointed out that the source code for Crash Bash actually refers to Rilla Roo as Kangarilla. Remove the rooster and the dingo, and voila! Could it have been that Rilla Roo was one of Dingodile's experiments? That sounds like the most likely option, taking into account the fact that this is the only piece of somewhat plausible evidence that we have, as well as the visual similarities between Dingodile and Rilla. What's to follow next is simply my speculations. The second theory takes us back earlier in the timeline. During the opening cutscene of the original Crash Bandicoot, Dr. Neocortex and his assistant Dr. Nitrous Brio use a device called the Evolve Array to crossbreed different animals in order to create a powerful army that is to be led by a Bandicoot named Crash. After the plan goes down the drain, Crash escapes Cortex's castle and whoops everybody's ass, eventually Cortex's as well, peace on the islands is restored and Crash flies his crushed Tana away from the burning citadel. In Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back, we find out what happened to Cortex after his defeat. However, we do not really know what went up with Nitrous Brio and where he was over the course of a 1-year period between the events of the first and second games. Now, as mentioned previously, the Crash Bash developers originally referred to Rilla Roo as Kangarilla. Could the codename Kangarilla have potentially existed as early as 1996 when the development of Crash 2 commenced? When thinking of Brio's 1-year absence between Crash 1 and 2, I was theorizing about where he could have retreated. Knowing that the series is mainly set in the fictional version of Australia, I went to Google Maps to look for some funky places and oh, look what I found. Kangarilla, South Australia. This might sound completely stupid and unsubstantiated, but there is a possibility that Brio fled to a place named Kangarilla, got inspired by its name, or rather Naughty Dog got inspired by the real-life location, and decided to create mutants of his own using the Evolve Array. We have to consider that Brio was mad at Cortex for using him and leaving him behind, so the plan to create his own little army of deadly beasts to get back at Cortex for his treachery is likely. During his first holographic appearance in the second game, Brio tells Crash,
"I will do anything in my power to stop you."
He also mentions that if Crash collects crystals instead of gems, that will serve as a sign to Brio that Crash is allied with Cortex, making him Brio's sworn enemy. The sudden appearance of Tiny Tiger and the Komodo brothers is a small supporting detail of this whole retaliation theory, because since those characters were not present in Crash 1, it can be assumed that they were in fact mutated by Brio during his time off, knowing his obsession for enlargement potions. So, Rilla, or Rilla Roo, is then quite possibly another one of those creations for retaliation that just wasn't revealed by the developers until later in the series, as there was no need for any more side characters at the time. Only with Naughty Dog's departure and the sudden halt in the main plot did Eurocom decide to finally put Rilla into the franchise. When Brio eventually reunited with Cortex during the events of Crash Bash, Rilla Roo also joined Uka Uka's dark side. If my theory is at all correct, it is safe to assume that Brio is the one that brought Rilla Roo along to help Uka Uka in the tournament. Some of you may ask though, how did Brio transport the Evolve Array to a secret lab to perform all of the experiments in the first place? I answer, Engine's ship. Vague answer, I know. I couldn't think of an exact way of how it all could have been carried out, but knowing that Brio went to the same school as Dr. Engine presumes that they may have been friends before Engine was lured in to help Cortex. Brio and Engine have seemed to be working together during the events of Twinsanity, so that can also support the idea that they may have been in a friendly relationship in the past. Friendly, not romantic. I know that just like me, you may have been one of those people that as a kid thought that Engine was a female, but that has been proven wrong, so their relationship can't be romantic. Unless they're gay. Well, it's 2017, so that's quite likely. But I won't branch off too much here. Now, why and how did Eurocom end up inserting this peculiar fella without an official backstory into the franchise? As seen in this shaky footage that was presumably filmed in May of 2000 during E3,
11/2000 on the bottom is the expected release date.
Rilla Roo is not even shown in the roster overview. It would not be surprising if it was your typical demo consisting of a limited two-man squad and one playable stage, but this build literally shows every single character besides Rilla Roo. If we assume that the development of Crash Bash began around the North American release date of CTR, and that is September 1999, then by May of 2000 the game was approximately 8 months, which is more than halfway into a total of 13 months of development. 5 months later, Rilla Roo is brought in. Once again, how and why was that done? Well, since it makes sense for both teams to have 4 players each for an equal competition, the 7 players that were seen in the May 2000 demo would not be a substantial number. Rilla Roo was that 8th guy to add balance. But why him? Up to that point, there have been numerous characters to assume the role of the 4th baddie. I guess there are 2 possibilities here. Number 1, Rilla Roo was probably absent from the E3 demo because he was that new surprise villain that the developers wanted to reveal only in the final version. Or, number 2, it could have been the opposite. 8 months into development, Eurocom simply still had no idea who to insert into the game, so they resorted to the old and nearly forgotten, scrapped character concept of Kangarilla. I do not have a concrete way to prove that, but I did manage to reach Mr. Matt Dixon, the former senior lead artist at Eurocom who actually worked on Crash Bash. He told me that despite his position in the team, he was not informed about the origins of Rilla Roo as he was in charge of background art. He suggested that I try to contact producer Mark Cerny instead, as Rilla Roo might have been a collaboration between him and the Eurocom character design team. Of course, even though my message to Mr. Cerny went through, he did not reply. Busy man, I understand. But the fact that Dixon referred me to Cerny in the first place can suggest 2 more things. Number 1, Cerny created Rilla Roo on the spot, either with or without Eurocom's help. Or, number 2, Cerny had access to old concept art from the previous Crash Bandicoot entries he's worked on with Naughty Dog. Remember, he was an executive producer on all previous entries but CTR, additionally serving as a designer on Crash 2 and 3. Matt Dixon would not have known about those concepts since he's never worked on any Crash games in the past. But Mark Cerny has. Until Mr. Cerny replies, if ever, we might never know the true origin of Rilla Roo. Many years later, in December of 2012, we witnessed the downfall of Eurocom. The team was disbanded and the company ceased operations.
No wonder. Have you played 007 Legends?
But do we know what happened to Rilla Roo? The Japanese version of Crash Bash, dubbed Crash Bandicoot Carnival, has outro credits similar to those in CTR, where the developers give bits of information about the characters and their future plans. Huge thanks to a Reddit user named BraVGC for translating Rilla Roo's slide, which says approximately this.
Rilla Roo, who had won all the way to the end, suddenly bust out an abacus and started doing some calculations. If I got a bonus from Oka Oka, I wonder what I'd use it on. I'd love to open up a yakiniku place with Dingo, become Koala Kong's manager, and do as I want in Hollywood. Alright, it's settled. I'm opening a yakiniku shop in Hollywood. Make sure you don't count your chickens before they hatch.
Additional thanks to Kaito for translating Embryo slide.
Is that so? I am the champion. I'm finally number 1. Aha aha. Having won this time, Brio, who had felt inferior to Cortex, decided to take over the world by himself. Where should I start? To begin with, I will try and make something with the genes from the Bandicoot, like how Rilla Roo was born from the genes of Ripper Roo. Maybe something like Bandicoot. Dr. Brio. There's no doubt that would fail.
Huh. Since the North American and European versions don't have this ending, there is no way we could have known how each character's tournament participation concluded. Unless, of course, we played Crash Bandicoot Carnival and spoke Japanese. However, we now know that Rilla Roo opened up a yakiniku restaurant in Hollywood with Dingodile. Can this hint at the first theory that Dingodile is the true creator of Rilla Roo? Or is it Brio, since he explicitly states that Rilla Roo is made out of Ripper Roo's genes? It sounds like he sure knows his stuff. Well, for us, there are only 2 ways to find out. Number 1, try to get an answer from Mark Cerny. Or, number 2, walk into every yakiniku restaurant in Hollywood and look for an ape-looking owner. The latter sounds more likely than the former, especially now that I live in Los Angeles. Alright guys, this concluded my very first and very rough theory video. I really hope I brought up some interesting points about the character and the franchise in general. If you have absolutely any comments, questions, or corrections, please leave them down below. Additionally, if you enjoyed the video, feel free to suggest any other Crash Bandicoot related topics to discuss. Alright guys, huge thank you for your time, and I'll see you later.